Welcome back to our garden, everyone. Look at these gorgeous peppers. We're going to be showing you today how to transplant these into pots to save them and overwinter them for next season. Now here's a crazy thing that a lot of people do not understand. Pepper plants are actually a perennial. I know, don't shoot the messenger. They are a perennial in their native growing environment, which is zones 9 through 11. So the extreme southern United States, Central and South America. There are accounts, you can read them, a lot of information out there about pepper plants, particularly hotter peppers that will last for upwards of 15 years, and the bush itself will last up to about 15 years. So since we're in zone 8B, these will not survive outside. We're just on that edge, probably 50, 60 miles above that edge where they could possibly survive outside, depending on how the winter is, where the jet stream is. But if we can get these into an environment in which they will save for next year, so put them in a pot, put them in our greenhouse or in the house, then we can help these guys to survive. And here's a little fact. When we lived in Houston, which is zone 9, we did have pepper plants on the front porch for 3 years straight. They were the same plants, they fruited. It was absolutely wonderful. We're gonna try to do that again here in our zone. Now there's a few reasons for this, and one of those is time to production. So a lot of pepper plants take forever to produce. I think serranos take about 150 days to fruit out and produce peppers. That is an extremely long time, and if you're not living in the South, you're probably not getting peppers. And in the springtime, depending on how the temperature fluctuation is, peppers are really hot weather plants. So you may not get good germination if you plant your seeds out and the soil temperature isn't right, even though it's the proper time of year to plant them. So having an established plant that you can bring out and replant is a really great thing. It's going to really give you a jump start on fruit for next year. So who wouldn't want a fully mature plant that you can get right out in the spring and get fruit from very, very quickly? That's just a win for everybody. Now let's show you how it's done. So there's one thing about pepper plants that is a little frustrating, and it is because they are very, very delicate. The weight of the peppers just recently snapped off this fairly thick branch right here on this pepper. And this is a really big pepper plant. So I am going to aim for transplanting and pulling out the smallest ones. I'm going to prune them anyway, but the smaller ones are going to be a little less prone to breaking when I get them out of the ground and get them into the pot. So keep that in mind. So first things first, we have to choose our pot size, and this is really important. There are two competing schools of thought on it, so let's discuss those now. The first is a small pot idea. Now, if it's indoors during the winter time and it has been pruned out, which we'll show you how to do in a minute, it's going to put on very minimal growth. It's probably not going to fruit until the spring, until you plant it back in the soil. So the big problem with peppers is that their roots are susceptible to root rot really bad. So you have to really, they like a very dry soil. So you have to mitigate the water really, really well. And doing that in a smaller pot, some say, is much easier. The bigger pot idea is that if you do get growth, a lot of growth during the wintertime, wherever you've placed the pepper plant, greenhouse, indoors in a nice sunny south-facing window, you're not going to become, the pepper plant is not going to become root bound. But you could overwater it in the big pot. You could think it's too dry in the top and there's actually a lot of water in the bottom. You know, kind of use your judgment. We are going to choose these smaller plants here because the big ones I think will just not do well inside, and they're really, really too delicate. So we're going to choose these smaller ones, and we're going to probably go with the smaller pots. Now that we got the pot issue out of the way, let's take a look at the plant itself. So before we dig the plant up, we're going to want to take off all of the fruit. You can see this one, I think this was a California Wonder, and it's turning red. That's what they do, and they mature. So we're going to take off the fruit very gently off of this one. And any small fruit that you see, we're going to pull those off, and we're also going to pull off the flowers as well, because those obviously will fruit out if this plant doesn't stress out too much, which it probably will when we transplant it in the pot, but we'll take the flowers off anyway. So pepper plants have a really shallow root system. You can, if your soil is soft enough, gently yank it up out of the ground, but we're not going to do that. Like I said, pepper plants are very, very delicate, so we're just going to use a spade shovel, get underneath it, and pop it up. So now that we have our pepper plant in our pot, we're going to do something to it that you might cringe at, and that is prune it. We're going to cut off probably 2/3 of this plant. Why? Well, that is because the root system that I got out of the ground is fairly small, and in your root system it's a direct correlation between the size of your root system and your foliage on top. So you want to prune back the foliage because your root system just got smaller. So you want to even the two out. The roots need to support what you still have on the top here. And that's going to ensure that the plant has the best chance of continuing on in the pot for next season. Now you also want to look to see if you have any damaged or stressed leaves, and you want to continue to look for these over the course of the time that this plant is going to be in quarantine. Yes, you want to quarantine your plant, you've heard that before you bring it in your house or put it in your greenhouse with your other plants. And that is simply because you don't want disease or pests from this plant transferring anywhere else. Because out here in the garden, you can mitigate those pests and diseases with other beneficial microbes and bacteria and fungi. But now we've just reduced the amount of garden soil that it has. We're going to fill it back up with either garden soil or potting soil and give it some nutrients to feed off of. But we want to limit ability for this plant to contaminate any other plant. So before we put this in the greenhouse or the house, we are going to quarantine it for about 1.5 to 2 weeks. And you can put it up near the house. Obviously bring it in if it's going to frost. Here in Texas it was 92 degrees today, so that's not going to happen. But we're about to get a cold snap coming next week. No frost, but it's about to get much colder. So we're going to take this up, we're going to put it next to the house, we're going to fill it up with a mixture of a good potting mix and some sand. Now the sand obviously is there for drainage. This is what they call topsoil in East Texas. You all know it as sand. It's got very little organic matter in it, which is why we mix it with a great topsoil here. So what I'm also going to add to this is some transplant formula from Mineralized Gardens. I like this stuff. It's got a lot of beneficial micronutrients in it, and it really helps with feeding the plant, which this plant is going to need to rejuvenate itself and feed itself, and it really needs some TLC in the coming weeks. Let's water this in and get it in our quarantine spot. You want to water it in well, but remember, like I said before, peppers don't like damp roots. They don't like a wet feet. So make sure that it drains well and that you don't overload on the water. So the reason we use the potting mix and the sand is because we weren't really comfortable using that garden soil from our garden because it's got a lot of creepy crawlies. I'm going to be putting it in the spare bedroom is where I put it in. That's where all of our plants are. But if you don't mind that, then go ahead and use that garden soil because that pepper is used to growing in it. And it's probably still got a lot of great nutrients left over. Now make sure if you bring it in right away that you do not place it in a really sunny place. And that is because that pepper plant is still under a lot of stress and it needs to settle down before getting blasted with any grow lights or any direct sunlight in a south-facing window. So give it that 1 to 2 weeks quarantine outside in a shady area. But if you do bring it inside right away, then put it in an area that's not going to get a huge amount of direct sunlight. If you have any comments, leave them in the comment section below. Now go check out this video playlist, which shows you all of our other gardening videos and all of our other gardening how-tos. Have a great day. We love you. We'll see you on the next video. Bye.